The North Sea, wild and unforgiving, and a hazardous workplace.
2 minutes to 7. We felt we had a marvelous operation, a safe operation. 2 minutes past 7, we had killed the guy.
It felt like it was about the worst week and months of my entire life, actually.
This is the story of a fatal incident on the Gyda platform. Directly involved was a 3-man lifting team from contractors Smedvig offshore. But its effects spread out to touch many others. What have they learned? And what can BP learn from what happened here, above the surging waves of the North Sea?
I think for executives, those in charge in situations like this, there is nowhere to hide.
The Gyda platform stands in the North Sea off the coast of Norway. Late one evening, a supply boat was expected, and the deck crew was rearranging the deck load to make sure there was enough space to store supplies coming out on the boat. During the night, the supply boat successfully unloaded. When the day shift came on, the new crane driver decided they could tidy up the deck a little, as more space was now available.
He saw that there was a few things on deck that wasn't according to the expected standard. He saw a couple of containers in a place they shouldn't be, and he also saw the 2 chemical pods being stacked on top of each other.
The team felt it would be safer to put these pods side by side.
Ola, we're going to hook the crane onto the top chemical pod, and he decided to climb the integrated ladder. At the same time he was dragging the chain sling towards him, he had to hold on to the ladder. And he was also communicating with the crane driver, so he was multitasking up there. Then he asked the crane driver to lower the hook from the crane. That came too low. Then he asked for that to be hoisted up a little bit.
But there was a problem that none of the team could see.
Ola was crushed between the container and the frame of the tank. The flagman, he was there immediately. The crane driver saw it in his camera that a terrible accident had happened, so he called for the nurse.
As I went towards the place where the accident happened, I used my eyes and I was thinking what can have happened. And my first thought was that Ola had fallen down and injured his head, because his head was full of blood. But the flagman could then tell me that he had got the container in his chest. I quickly understood that he was so hard injured that there was not so much for me to do.
Offshore priest Arvid Dwight arrived on the first helicopter out to the platform just a couple of hours later.
The rig is kind of frozen. Nothing's going on, and I found the guys closest involved in the accident, they were broke down, totally broke, and they were having a very bad time.
When I came into the OIM office where they were sitting, the crane operator screamed to me, "Oh, Bodil, Bodil, I've killed a man, I've killed a man." Yeah. And then one of the flagmen said, "Oh, we have killed a man."
The decision was made to fly Ola's body out on the next helicopter, and Arvid made arrangements for his teammates to say a final farewell.
We are now going to take him to the helicopter, and if you want to see him, you can come. And two of them came, and the nurse, together we helped them to take a proper farewell, and then the door to the helicopter deck was opened. This is a terrible noise, and you were kind of torn apart again from the kind of quiet farewell, and so we were in the tragedy.
Back on shore, news of the accident had reached senior executives. For them, it was the type of phone call they had always dreaded.
I went over to BP and I wish I never had got in this situation. You know, it's what we work for day after day after day, not coming into this situation.
It was something where, for a good few weeks after the accident, it was on my mind as I went to sleep at night. It was the first thing I thought of when I woke up in the morning.
The next of kin of Ola Sörbön was his parents, a brother and a sister. And I spoke to those people that same day. And I spent time with those people at their farm the day after. Those days I will never forget.
Back on the rig, there was an urgent need to find out what had happened before evidence and memories began to disappear.
Because I was in Norway on business, I was able to get out to the platform the same day the incident occurred. I arrived that evening. Upon arrival, probably two main thoughts. One was around starting the investigation in the right way, preserving the scene, making sure we were clear on what we needed to do. But the second is kind of recognizing the trauma these people had just gone through and were quite clearly suffering with.
The investigation team quickly established what had happened, the critical factors that contributed to the accident. One chemical pod was stacked on top of another. Ola was halfway up the ladder on the upper pod. He asked for the crane pendant to be hoisted. The crane pendant became trapped, and the pods weren't stable when stacked.
If you clear one side of the tank 5 centimeters, it will slide off. That's not good enough. And it could also be impacted by a moving container next to it or something, and the same could have happened. So it's not a good enough design.
When these were originally manufactured, they were manufactured and designed for stacking. I think our expectations are much higher than they were when these were built. Therefore, the standards they were built to probably are not sufficient to meet the current expectations. Somehow, over the years, we've not recognized that.
With the basic facts established, the investigation team turned its attention to the immediate causes of those critical factors. There was clearly inadequate equipment and a lack of knowledge of the hazard. But the team had made improper decisions and showed a lack of judgment and weren't paying attention to their surroundings and what was happening. They had treated this as a routine activity. But there had also been violations of procedures.
They were basically breaking quite a few rules. The working at height rule, was working higher than 2 meters but not having a safety harness. That didn't really contribute to the accident, but we would have hoped that if they had acted upon it, they would have stopped up and thought about what they were about to do and see that this was not a routine task anymore.
The investigation team also focused on the shortcut taken by Ola in climbing up and reaching over to get the chain. The rule says he should have hooked on at deck level. If he'd gone around to the other side of the container, he could have reached the chain from the deck.
Why didn't he do that? Well, we may never know, but he happened to be on that side of the container at the moment. There was a ladder there. It was probably just as expedient, maybe more expedient in his mind to climb up. We'll actually never know why he did it. But clearly, just taking the extra 5 seconds to walk around to look at the site, to actually then notice that the hook was available and that it would be much safer to hook on with it at deck level than to climb to the top of this container.
It's very clear that procedures need to be followed to the finest detail. It's not like you can choose what you do. You have to follow it. And we've seen on this accident and that what might appear to people to be small breaches actually combine to very, very bad accidents.
But the trail of responsibility did not stop there. Why had the lifting crew violated these procedures? This is what lay at the heart of the accident on Gyda. To managers involved who were quick to point out Gyda's impressive safety record, the answer came as a shock. The investigation found there had been inadequate leadership. Overall, the HSE culture both on and off the platform was poor. For example, there was poor oversight of contractors by the platform management, who didn't enforce performance standards. They allowed inadequate work planning and poor communications. Supervisors weren't adequately identifying risk, safe behavior, or job hazards.
In all of the BP Norway documents, there was not anything as simple as what were individual roles and responsibilities with regard to safety. What were management's expectations? What did it really mean to be a safety supervisor? And as we told supervisors, go out into the workforce, they didn't really understand what it was they were expected to do when they were there.
Generally, offshore, there were not enough formal work procedures, and those that existed often weren't properly followed. When procedures were violated, those incidents weren't properly reported or followed up. There were sometimes different work practices between different shifts. When it came to training, both operators and supervisors lacked competence, and procedures for carrying out and verifying training were inadequate. Onshore management didn't follow up on previously identified and reported hazards, in particular on the actions agreed after a management of change review on Gyda and an earlier audit report by the Norwegian regulator. It was a long and disturbing list. Managers hadn't realized how far standards had drifted. Primarily, the accident on Gyda came about because of inadequate leadership.
It starts at the top, where leaders execute their duty of saying, here is no tolerance, and set those examples. And that what is driving the people out there is a culture saying, we need to look after each other. We have to have the courage to say, stop, let's think about this before we proceed. And that happens in all those cases. We are not absolutely sure that what we are about to do is safe.
Are you insisting on zero tolerance to breaches of procedure? They hadn't realized that safety standards were slipping away from them.
2 minutes to 7, we felt we had a marvelous operation, a safe operation. 2 minutes past 7, we had killed a guy.
Is your operation at 2 minutes to 7?
It's very clear that procedures need to be followed to the finest detail.
In all of the BP Norway documents, there was not any anything as simple as what were individual roles and responsibilities with regard to safety?
I think for executives, those in charge in situations like this, there is nowhere to hide.